Part 3. Here we go with the fun part that I don't see very many people talking about when everybody is, oh, the great glory, we're going to cut the cord, we're going to leave the old media, this is streaming, this is the wave of the future, this is blah, 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 blah. Okay. I want everybody to think about, if they're old enough to do it, think about when cable started. I want everybody, if they're old enough to remember it, think about when streaming, when Netflix first started. And what was one of the cool things about cable when it first started? What was the really amazing thing about Netflix when it first started? It was very affordable. And for that very affordable price, you could find everything in the world that you loved, that you remembered, that you'd seen, things you'd heard other people talk about loving. If there was a great loved and beloved movie or TV show, odds were good you could find it on Netflix when Netflix first started. There was that TV show that everybody told you about that was like so amazing and funny from the 70s, ran for 5 or 6 seasons. It still cost you way too much money to buy it on DVD, but here it is, $6 a month, and you can see it as many times as you want. Stream it, binge it, do whatever it, and right there on Netflix. And kind of like you couldn't do that in that fashion with cable in the old days, but still, cable in the old days, it was like the greatest hits collection of the best TV and movies from throughout the decades before cable launched as an entity. Things that people hadn't seen in years but had told people about were suddenly showing up on their TV on one of the early cable channels. And then later again on Netflix, which had stuff, like I said, in part 2 going all the way back to the silent era. So that was a big thing. It was, you had all of this content, all of these great things that you loved. And then it got even better because really smart creators were making deals with these services and creating original content. Jessica Jones, Daredevil, Good Omens, Cargo, the one on Netflix, the zombie film, which even if you don't like zombie films, you should be checking out Cargo. My wife, who does not cry during sappy crying movies, and does not really like horror movies per se, actually teared up at the end of Cargo. And that's not something that says, oh, if you're a horror fan, you shouldn't watch it because, oh, sappy, whatever. No, it's a genuinely intelligent, good horror film. And it's a horror film that probably people that even don't like horror films can find watchable and feel an impact from. So, there are these original programs and original movies that are being created for all of these different platforms. And of course, Disney is going crazy with, we're going to create, and we're going to put some good money into creating Marvel and Star Wars and whatever else original content for our streaming service. And CBS is cranking out Star Trek products on their streaming service like there's no tomorrow at this point. And whenever they figure out what the hell they're going to do with DC, giving it its own streaming service or dumping it all into HBO or however they're going to do it, they'll probably start expanding their library of brand new originals wherever they're going to do it. So, yeah, there are creators out there that are going to these services and they're making, genuinely really cool, really good entertainment. And then at the same time, streaming has kind of been acting a little bit like the old Dish, and I don't mean Dish Network or DirecTV, without going as long as part 1 and taking a trip into yesteryear. Back in the 80s, if you were around back then as an adult or a teenager, you had somebody knew one person or maybe sometimes more than one that had a satellite dish in their yard. and literally a satellite dish. It was like the big 7-8 foot wide bowl dish on this mount. You'd go out and you'd crank it and point it in the right direction to hit a certain satellite before they started really encoding all of the programming. And you could see television shows from other countries, which worked great for like Australia and the UK and maybe Canada. But then there was occasionally that one person's like, look at this is so cool. What? This is TV from Japan. Do you speak Japanese? No, but this is so cool. Look. Well, streaming services have started doing that as well. They haven't been able to create as much new content as some of them have wanted to, but they've spent less for more by being a producer or creating an exclusive distribution deal for certain shows from other countries. And so you get like these really cool English or Scottish or Irish or Australian shows or Canadian shows that you wouldn't otherwise see. And you'll occasionally get those Japanese shows and, oh, look at that. Unlike when you had a dish, they've even taken the work to either give you a decent English audio dub or given you subtitles. So yeah, you've got that. But here's the problem when you start looking at that. When you start talking about all the things that you love about the streaming services, one of the big things, yes, people talk about, these cool new originals and so such and such is, they're talking about they're going to come out and they're going to have this cool new original show on this. But a lot of times, really, what you end up doing with streaming services is you watch a lot of your old favorites. You'll get into a mood and you'll binge 2, 3, 4 seasons of your old show, and there'll be like these huge announcements. Friends, which I was never a fan of. I'm sorry for those of you that love it, but can never stand it. But when Friends, they announced, I think Netflix had the deal, and they announced that, all of Friends was coming to Netflix. It was like major entertainment news things. You're going to be able to binge the whole series. It's all going to be there. Netflix soon, blah, blah, blah. And, people were catching up on Friends that they hadn't seen in a little while or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. But that was the thing. Or, people would complain because a streaming service, when they were still kind of doing it a little randomly, streaming service would get a movie. And it's like movie number 2 of a franchise. And in some cases, the franchise, it's not like random stuff, like some of the Friday the 13th or something like that. It's like, the Star Wars or the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit or, something where they're telling a story across multiple movies. And they're like, well, they've got movie number 2, but they don't have movie number 1 or 3. Or they've got movies 3 and 1, but they don't have movies number 2. Or, well, they've got to deal with this thing, and they've got seasons 3 through 4, or 3 through 5, but they don't have 1 and 2. And then there's like these weird deals where it's like, oh, well, they've got all the seasons, but for some reason, like Quantum Leap was like this. Quantum Leap was on either Amazon or Netflix, I can't remember which one. And I was looking for certain episodes, and I'm like, I finally looked it up on the internet, like, maybe I'm just missing it, I'll narrow it down. I'm positive it was season 3. And I look, yep, okay, season 3, episode 5, and I'd go look, and it's like, it's not there. Because it was this weird thing of, they still wanted to sell their DVDs and Blu-rays. So part of the streaming deal was some of the really like buzzworthy episodes weren't on the streaming service. So you'd run into stuff like that occasionally. But you still had all the rest of everything else, right? Even if there were these little blips that would annoy you, you still had everything else. And you'd dive in and you'd watch all this stuff, and it was, your favorites of yesteryear. And oh, look, here's 6 to 8 episodes of new stuff that's really, really cool. And then some new stuff that, what in the hell were they thinking? Okay. So we're going to go along and we're going to do what people are talking about doing. We're going to cut the cord. We're going to abandon the old media. Screw the old media. It's a ripoff. Streaming is the way of the future, right? And it's more affordable. Even though they're definitely working at making it not so affordable. I want you to think about something. I want you to think about how much new stuff comes out every year on TV and in the movie theaters that you watch and you go, wow, this is really good. I'm so glad they did this, or I'm so glad they did that. All right. Now, think about that not being there anymore. I mean, we're actually probably never going to get to that point. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't talk about when they talk about the new media completely getting rid of the old media. That old media is the source of 95% of everything that's on a streaming service. The TV shows, some of them good, some of them bad, some of them great, some of them, oh my God. But the TV shows that are, create 22 episodes of content every year that then end up going on the streaming service for you to binge. Those TV shows, they're not being created for a streaming service. They're being created for a network TV broadcast that you see over the air or through cable. Those movies, 95% of those movies or more, those movies that you're like, oh my God, I'll wait for it to go to stream. Well, okay. But guess what? It's in the box office first. That's where it makes its money. Granted, coronavirus has kind of tilted some things around, and God knows what we're going to see next. But what is it? Trolls. That's what I was trying to think of. This Trolls movie that blew up so huge. And as much as people talk about how much money Trolls made going direct to a streaming platform, and you had to pay, however much money for streaming, a bunch of movies, they tried that with a bunch of movies. And honestly, I'd really be interested in seeing exactly how much money you really made with that. I would honestly be interested in seeing how much money some of those studios recouped on their budgets for these big screen movies. Trying to get that money back on streaming services. Because I'm pretty sure it wasn't, the giant Boffo box office that paid for the budgets for a lot of the movies from the last few years. And bear in mind, a lot of the movies from the last few years haven't been making their money back. Have not been making their budget back because they haven't been making enough money in the box office to do it. And now you're talking about the possibility of things tilting even more because of the fallout of coronavirus and now the social events that are happening. That's going to impact everybody who's so used to the streaming services doing what they do. Now there's going to be a wait. A lot of movies that were supposed to come out in 2020 got delayed. They pushed them off to 2021. Some of them, they were like, we're going to take a chance. Disney, they really wanted to get people to jump on their service. So they put a few movies directly to Disney. A few movies that were risky gambles Honestly, that Trolls movie should have been a risky gamble, but it was one of the few kids movies that during coronavirus was going to be out there, going to streaming. It probably did better than it might have otherwise done. Other movies like The Hunt were a risky gamble. There were people that were completely prejudiced against the movie through the more or less smear campaign against it. And then there were people that just, that's not their thing. I doubt it did as well on streaming as it would have done in theaters. But for the most part, they're not doing that. We get a few of them that go to direct to streaming, $20 rentals. But a lot of them, the studios are still, they know where their bread and butter is, and they're putting the movies off to late 2020 or 2021. Now, a lot of people aren't thinking beyond, well, I wanted to see that, Wonder Woman should have come out in the theaters this weekend. Well, good for you. But if Wonder Woman doesn't come out, if Wonder Woman 2 does not come out in the theaters this weekend, and it's not going to come out until later this year or maybe even next year, what's going to go to streaming during the natural cycle of goes to the box office, runs its course at the box office, goes to direct-to-video and streaming, and blah, 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 or goes to actually DVD and Blu-ray first, and then goes to streaming. Goes to video on demand first, though. Now, they're getting so weird with that, depending on who's doing it. But anyhow, I mean, that natural cycle. If there are fewer movies hitting the box office and they're being held back, there's going to be a lot less new content coming to streaming. You had a bunch of TV shows, the Arrowverse, the WB Arrowverse, Flash and all this other stuff, that got kind of cut short. There were some other TV shows, The Walking Dead, supposedly had, there was more they wanted to do with the season, and they had bigger plans to wrap it up, but the coronavirus clamped down, shut everything down, so we kind of got a shortened season. Okay. Here's the thing that a lot of people aren't talking about. The natural progression of all of this stuff. It goes to TV. It makes its money. It makes its money on network television or cable television with its ad revenue. And then once it goes through there, then they whoever's paying for the license puts it to streaming. A movie goes to the box office. It makes whatever money it can at the box office. Once it makes its money at the box office, then it goes to streaming. We're going to see less going to streaming because 2020 has had less overall. What you're going to see with streaming at the end of 2020, what you're going to see with streaming at the beginning of 2021, I want you to magnify that by a factor of about 10. Because people talk about, we're going to, the old media is dead. We're not going to be doing that cable stuff. We're not going to be doing that TV stuff. It's all going to be streaming. That's the future. And it's a wonderful future. It's the golden age. And screw the, box office movies. Okay, whatever. Those people, they're ripping us off anyhow and blah, blah, blah. No, they're, okay, I'm not going to argue whether they're ripping you off or not. But you actually know what they're doing. However you want to define it, giving us a good bargain, ripping us off, entertaining us or not. What they're doing is they're making their money. Largely, very often, they're making their money through the ad sales on TV or through the box office profits. That's their golden goose. Granted, their box office has been really spotty lately because they keep doing stupid things like making bad movies or marketing them in horrendously bad ways, but that's where they're aiming their product for, hoping to make that money back, because that's their golden goose. If you take that golden goose away, you are cutting the head off of probably 55% or more of the content creation that you expect to see on a streaming service. Because most of the new content that comes to a streaming service every year is not content created by the streaming service or for the streaming service. It is content that is created for other platforms or outlets first. Yes, they are making things, and yes, people make a big deal out of it. People make a huge big deal out of talking about how much streaming service content is out there. But, okay, I'm going to be slightly disjointed in getting back into this because we had a slight interruption. Minor emergency with the baby birds that my kids are keeping an eye on, who built a nest in the package delivery box next to our front door, because of course, that's a safe place. It doesn't get a lot of use. So anyhow, but basically where I was going was, you've got all of these things, they're being made for other platforms, other distribution first. They're not being made for streaming. And the amount of streaming, a new material that's being made for streaming, everybody makes a big deal out of, oh my God, look at this brand new thing, and I'm so there. But the reality is, there's very little actual content in comparison that's being made for streaming services. I was over the moon about Good Omens. I loved that book, and I love Neil Gaiman, and I love Terry Pratchett, and particularly the fact that Neil Gaiman was going to be as hands-on as he did. I was over the moon that they were going to do that. And is one of the benefits of the streaming services that occasionally you get these crazy things that you would not otherwise be able to get anywhere else, because they can take that chance. And there are things that are being created for streaming services, very much like for premium cable. It's like it's intelligently written, and it's not something that you would normally see created for regular primetime television. So there are some creative benefits to having streaming, but quantity, and yes, a lot of people are going to say quality versus quantity, but the reality is there is a large quantity of quality stuff that is being created because the platforms that are out there, the non-streaming platforms, provide a large enough of a base for people to create a lot. And yes, when you create a lot of it is crap. A huge amount of it is crap, but you are creating so much stuff that just by numbers, not percentages, there's still a huge number of really, really good things being created. But these are all being created by on platforms that pay for it long before it goes to streaming, where everybody now likes to see it. If you take that out of the equation, when people talk about streaming is in the future, and the old platforms, the old entertainment media, that's dead. The empires are going to fall. Where are they going to get that money? There's only one or two ways things are going to go. They're either not going to get the money, and you're going to see an incredibly huge drop-off in the amount of content. And just because you see a drop-off in content doesn't mean, well, now only the best of the best is going to get made. You're just going to see a drop-off of content. And if you're lucky, good stuff gets made. If you're not lucky, good stuff doesn't get made. Then, beyond that, there's the ever so fun thing of, let's say they're making a bunch of good content. Not as much content, but they're going to figure out a way to charge you. Shortest version of saying this. If you think some of the prices are bad now, wait until you have to be the primary source of money for a streaming service to create new content. When we become the primary source for income, when there is no more box office, if there is no more ad revenue, then we are the revenue, and all of those prices are going to go up, and all of those, man, this stuff is expensive and there's not enough on, is going to get even worse. And even more so, streaming is going to become the new cable, because it's going to become expensive. The one way they might mitigate this is, they might put ad revenue on streaming. I mean, we're already seeing that with some things, where you can watch something without a subscription, but you get the ad version. Tubi does it, and they put their ads in the worst random places. WWE Network is now you're starting to see ads that are not just for WWE Network products, but outside ads on top of the subscription you're paying. And that's going to completely and fundamentally change the way streaming works. When that starts happening, because, hey, that convenient watch that episode that would normally take you an hour to watch, but you can watch it in 40 minutes. Nope, you're going to be back to an hour. And you're going to be, in some cases, like the CW app, depending on the streaming service or the product, where like you have to watch the same ad 5 times in a row. And censorship issues. You'll hear about the thing where it's like, oh, hey, they censored this thing on the network because the sponsors freaked out. So we've pulled that. That won't be in the reruns. And they cut out a piece of the episode, or that whole episode is gone. In very rare cases, you see that with streaming. The Muhammad episode from the early, the Super Best Friends episode of South Park, just that doesn't show up anywhere. And honest to God, I'm glad I have my DVD set, because I don't know how many more years you'll be able to buy that set and have that episode in it. But a lot of people, they censored that on the TV run, or they pulled that out of rotation when it came to syndication. But it's there on the streaming because that's a subscription service. We don't have to worry about sponsors and advertisers. Guess what? As some of these streaming services start moving towards subscriptions with ads to kind of defray costs and to cover creating new content, guess what problems are going to come with them? But the biggest problem is going to be content, period, straight up. Because, like I said before, sit down and look at your streaming service. How much, by percentage, how much of that streaming service is original content just created for that service? Not exclusively streaming, but created somewhere originally. How much content is exclusively, originally created for that service versus the stuff they've licensed and they carry? How much stuff do they make per year? And Netflix is honest about it. Netflix has said, we're going to move up our subscription costs because we've got this great idea to produce all this new entertainment, and that's going to cost money. So we're taking out loans against our business to have the revenue to do it, but we're also going to need to increase the subscription costs. And people are whining like stuck pigs about that now. Imagine when you have to do that for everything. And here's the nasty, dirty secret about those costs going up that a lot of people aren't looking at and aren't talking about right now, because it's, in their mind, probably, if they think of it at all, too far down the road. It's what I touched on in part 2. All of these services are being owned and run by the people that turned cable into crap. The same studios, the same businesses, the same corporate entities. Those same corporate entities that own all these channels also own the network channels that you can get over the air, kind of, sort of, these days. all of these business interests, if they own the golden goose, they're not going to kill the golden goose. And they're not going to kill the golden goose and have nothing to replace the golden goose if they get around to actually killing the golden goose, as some people seem to think they will when they're talking about the old media is dead, long live the new media. They are not going to get rid of cable. It's going to be around for a while. And they're certainly not going to get rid of, at least by their choice, the box office and the networks. Because that's where their bread and butter is. That's where their big revenue source is. Streaming is becoming a big revenue source, but streaming is still not their primary source. When that has to become their primary source, that is when they are going to turn streaming 110% into cable, into what we have now. Because the only two options are reduce the amount of new content, which they're not going to do, because new content is where they make their new money. New content is where they get new interest and new merchandising and new licenses off of. You know, you can only roll out so many new toy products based on a 1980s TV show so many times before collectors are even going, God, again, no, I got to tap out on this line. But you can get people all sorts of excited, and kids all sorts of excited about merchandise based on this brand new TV show with this crazy sci-fi whatever thrust to it. New money comes off of new creations. They're going to keep trying to make as many new creations as they can, and they're not going to be able to do it on the current model of streaming. The only way they're going to be able to do it is if streaming literally becomes every bit the old media that we're dealing with now. So, again, because I promised to keep this one shorter, when you sit there and you say, we've cut the cord, no, you haven't. Because the people that own the cord own all of these streaming services. They own all the content that you're trying to watch on these streaming services. And they are not going to give up the revenue stream that these old sources of media gave them. And if you think it's not going to cost you as much money, I got news for you. Pay better attention to the music industry and the book industry. When we went from cassette tapes to CDs, one of the selling points in the music media for going to CDs was CDs were cheaper to produce than cassettes. They were cheaper to package. There were less defects, so there were less returns, so there were less costs to the studios. And you could actually ship probably more of them in one go. So you kind of save some money a little bit on shipping, because you get more of them in one truck to get out, cover things, so you didn't have to spend as much money in gas or man hours and all this and blah, blah, blah. So there were all these big to little costs that you were saving by going from cassette to CD. And despite the fact that the industry itself was saying CDs are cheaper to produce, CDs are cheaper to make, they don't cost us as much money, and all the secondary costs are less. When you went to the music stores, your $12 cassette was still $12, and your CD of that album was $16. Because it was the cherished new media. It was the prized and wanted new media. And then we went to digital. digital books, digital music, digital film, I can go to iTunes or Amazon, and honest to God, I can buy some CDs for less money. And this is the thing that blows my mind. I'll look up the digital download, and I'm not a big, I like solid media, physical media. If I can only get a good deal on the digital content, I'll download it, I'll immediately burn a backup disk, play it a few times to make sure it's good, and then put it away in a safe place. But I haven't had to do that a few times because you know what? You can buy the digital content, which a lot of people quote unquote prefer, whether they do or they don't, I don't know. But you can buy the digital content for an album for $14.99. I want you to think about that. The digital content, no CD, no nothing. You're just downloading. It's like $14.99. So it's not that much cheaper than CDs were when they came out in the 80s, in the 90s. But then I'll sit there and I'll look and I'll go, wait a second, what is that? And I'll click on it, and I can buy the CD for $10, and the CD comes with an MP3 rip automatically. I was looking at a Godzilla CD, an album from one of the old soundtracks, because I was trying to look for something for some convention panels that we ended up not doing this year because Corona apocalypse. But I was looking up a Godzilla soundtrack. The digital, the cost for the MP3 digital download was something like $11 or $12. The 3 or 4 tracks that I knew I definitely wanted were like $1.99 a piece. So I would have spent about $8. The CD, which I could order and then rip and make a digital of, the CD was $5.99. We're moving to digital. A lot of people don't want physical media, so the price of physical media is dropping. But when you look at the digital, the price of digital media, despite the fact that they said CDs are going to be cheaper than cassettes, and digital media is going to be cheaper than CDs and DVDs and Blu-rays, and there's less returns and less costs and less blah, 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 and we don't have to pay for gas, and we don't have to pay for people to put them on the shelves, and we don't have to so all of these other costs are going away, so it's so much cheaper for the studios. The digital content costs you as much or more than the physical content, because that's what the studios are doing. That's where they're trying to make their money. I can go to Amazon and I can get a book sent to my house that costs me $11.95 for the book. Or I can get it on Kindle sometimes for $3 and $4 more. Sometimes they're about the same. But more and more of late, I have noticed that books that I want, the book is cheaper than the Kindle. Even though, pardon me, there should be less cost to the Kindle. There's no physical material. They're not having to make anything. They're not having to ship it. They're not having to handle it. You press a button, boom, it downloads to your computer. That's it, done. But the digital costs more. Look at that. That's the future of streaming. If all the other stuff goes away, if we lose the old media, if we get what so many of these people say they want, death to the old media, long live the streaming golden age, what you're seeing with Kindle purchases or music purchases, that's what you're going to be seeing with streaming. You're going to be spending a lot more money, and you're probably going to be getting less. The good news is, and this, even though it's not good news, the good news is, even with Corona apocalypse hastening some things, we're probably not going to get that for a little while. Because the reality is, as I said, the people that own all the old media now own pretty much all of the new media, with the exception of Netflix and Amazon, and maybe a few others. They're not going to cut their own necks off to make you happy. They're not going to let the old media die, and they're not going to let the old ways die until they can figure out a way to leverage the new media to be every bit as profitable to them as the old media. But even when they do that, there's going to be a bad transition period, and a lot of content creation is going to take a hit. I almost guarantee it. Because we're going to see that now. Less content created, not even less content created, less content going to its primary sources first and being delayed is going to be less content going to streaming. That's going to be a preview of probably a fairly long period that's going to come sometime or another down the road with streaming. Is we're going to see this happen to where streaming is going to start costing more and we will see less for a period. And then once they work out the bugs, we're probably still going to see less original content. And we're going to be paying more for it as more and more of it becomes exclusive to streaming services, like it's exclusive now to channels. You can't turn on NBC and watch the latest new ABC hit on NBC on the same night. Streaming services are going to be the same. They already are. So, in very much in that way, the cutting the cord is just going to become the new cord. You're not going to have the golden age the way people are talking about it, because I don't think a lot of people are looking at it the right way. And whether or not they ever straighten it out and we start seeing good content creation at the same level, the same amount that we see now, probably will. It's going to take a while, but it's going to be a hit. There's going to be some cutback. There's going to be some problems. And the downside to that is right now we're saying, oh yeah, look, all these brilliant creators that are going to streaming and making these really cool things, kind of like we were saying, all these brilliant creators who are bypassing movies and bypassing networks and going to specialized cable channels where they can really make cool stuff. Well, they're going to be kind of out of luck because there's not going to be as many places for them to go. There's not going to be as much room. You're going to have a limited number of places to sell that, and eventually some of the risky stuff will still come through. But unfortunately, a lot of times we're going to get what we get now. This is too smart. This is too intelligent. This isn't going to play on the mainstream because they're not going to get it. We need you to dumb this down a little bit, or we need to go with something else. That's the fate of streaming. The way things are going right now, that's the fate of streaming. And the way things are moving, honestly, I wrote a column for Needless Things, talking about certain things that I saw coming down the road with streaming. And at the time I said, in probably about 10 years, and being a not as technology savvy as I could be, I was wrong. It only took 4 or 5, not 10 or more. Even accounting for a little bit of how much faster I think things are going to go, right now I would have said, in about 6, it's going to be in about 10 years or more. Again, 10 to 15 years, we're really going to start seeing the decline of streaming as a golden age and completely seeing it turn into, the cord all over again in the worst ways. And if I think it's 10 or 15 years, it's probably only going to be 7 or 8. So when I see all these people dancing in the streets talking about how great, we're in the golden age of entertainment, streaming is so great, we're cutting the cord and death to the old media because streaming, the way of the future, is the new media, I'm just looking at that and thinking, you know what, I saw the old media. I saw the old media when it was the new media. And I saw how everybody loved it, and I saw how the studios and the business interests came in and destroyed it and turned it into their crappy money-making machine. And now all of those same people, after that time when they laughed at the people behind Netflix until they actually realized, because of Netflix, how much money was in streaming, those same people are the ones that turned cable into a horrible thing and kind of have ruined other aspects of media and entertainment. And now they're the ones who are in charge of streaming. They are the ones who are in charge of the new media and the future. And I guarantee you that they are going to do everything they can to turn the future into the worst repeat of the past that they can. So enjoy cutting the cord while you can enjoy it. Enjoy the new media while it's still gold and not pyrite. Because that's probably got about another 10 years at best. And after that, welcome to the new cord, same as the old cord.